So, we're going to come back to that in the second half, but let me give you, to bring the first half of the evening to close, let me give you Oilfield 101. I'm going to explain to you basically what occurred on the rig and how this event was perpetrated. Now, you've all heard, of course, that Halliburton have accepted some of the blame. Now, this, in my opinion, is a travesty, but this is the classic collusion between the oil field companies, because what Halliburton are doing here is effectively mitigating BP's liability by saying, yeah, okay, hands up, you know, we take our share of the blame. Now, in my opinion, based on my analysis, their contribution to this, I mean, I identified what their contribution was, but in the end, in the scheme of things, it was the BP company man, the guy who has the head honcho position on the rig for all drilling and production operations, who literally has the responsibility. Now, Halliburton were contracted on the rig to do the cementing job. Now, the cementing is to run the cement into the well to secure the casing. Now, you've got to remember, this well was in the final stages of construction, and this was the final stage of the casing that was being put into place, so then the well could have been opened and started production. Now, to protect the geology, you put the casing down through the centre of the borehole. And it's absolutely critical that the casing is held in the centre of the borehole, so the cement around the outside of the casing is even all the way around. Because if the casing...
Hello.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
Sorry, sir. Thank you. Come with me.
Works with BP, probably. So it's absolutely critical that the casing is held in the centre. And this is done by putting spacers into the cement. So the cement is pumped down the centre of the casing. When it gets to the bottom of the hole, it's got nowhere else to go except up the side. And the way in which the way in which the casing is held in the central position is that the spacers, which are in the cement, get to the bottom, they open out and come up the side and keep the casing in the middle. Now, the Halliburton job design called for 23 spacers in this final section of casing. And something occurred now that has never been known in the oil industry, and that is the BP company man turned around and said, 23, you don't need 23, 8 will suffice. Now, this is not a cost issue. I mean, the spacers are really not worth even worrying about. It's pennies. There is no reason whatsoever, no technical reason for the BP company man to question the design of the Halliburton engineers. Now, even the guys on the rig would not have been the guys who did the job design. The job design would have been done by a very, very experienced cementing engineer who worked on the rigs but was now working in the office, and his job would be to design the cement job. The guys on the rig, none of them would have been trainees. That I can assure you. This rig was drilling at the edge of Western drilling and production technology. And I specifically say Western because the Russians are light years ahead. So nobody on this rig was a trainee. They would have known their craft, literally and metaphorically, inside out, upside down and backwards. But anyway, the mistake the Halliburton engineer made was agreeing to pump the job. And agreeing to pump the job to the modified design of 8 spacers. Now, what pressure was brought to bear on that Halliburton engineer to run that job, we don't know. And of course, until the Gulf Coast hearings asked that question, we won't know. So today, all we know is that the job was run with 8 spacers, which seriously compromised the integrity of the cement in that final stage, because obviously the length of casing, it would have done this. So in other words, the cement would have been uneven in certain places around it. Now, one of the reasons that Halliburton, of course, is the easy target is because this guy was the chief executive officer of Halliburton from 1995 until 2001, when he was sworn in as President of the United States of America. So that wasn't a Freudian slip. He was the president. George Bush was the guy with the badge that said president, but this is the guy who did, who called all the shots. Him and his buddy, Donald Rumsfeld, who have a career, a Machiavellian political career that goes back 35 years. And of course, if you want to know Donald Rumsfeld's role in things, then I encourage you to watch my DVD, The Truth Injection, and you can see how Donald Rumsfeld is the architect of things like bird flu, swine flu, aspartame, so on and so forth. These guys, know how to get the agenda into place. Now, another clue that these guys knew that something was up was, as many of you will know, I was one of the first civilians to go into Kuwait at the end of the First Gulf War, which is actually what got me started on this particular trail, mainly because the evidence that I witnessed personally in Kuwait did not support the official version of events. And of course, basically that has now been corroborated, although you've never read it in the mainstream media. The oil fires of Kuwait were started by the US Special Forces. And it took me 5 years to actually come to terms with what I'd witnessed. But the firefighting companies in Kuwait that we worked with, there was 4 of them. Red Adair, which everybody's heard of course, because Red Adair dealt with the Piper Alpha blowout in 1988. The 3 other companies that are at least equal to Red Adair's capabilities are Wild Well Control, Safety Boss, and a company called Boots and Coots. And in my opinion, Boots and Coots are probably the leading company when it comes to dealing with oil field catastrophe, oil field fires, rig fires, blowouts, etc. So what a remarkable coincidence when 1 week before the BP Deepwater Horizon, Halliburton acquire Boots and Coots. So the company that has now accepted partial responsibility for what occurred actually owns the company that could deal with the problem at subsea level. Now we come into my former company, Schlumberger. Schlumberger were on the rig. Schlumberger were contracted to do what's called the cement bond log. Now this is the final testing of the integrity of the cement to make sure that the casing will hold in place when the well is open for production. And it's critical that the cement is doing its job, because the way in which the well's open for production is it's perforated with explosives. You lower a special tool down the casing, and the tool basically sets off controlled explosions which open the pores in the casing for the oil hydrocarbons to start flowing through. And you're not going to do that unless you're absolutely sure that the casing is securely held in place and can withstand the stresses of that. Well, if Schlumberger had been commissioned to do the cementing, then it would have been Halliburton or somebody else that would have been commissioned to do the cement bond log. Because Halliburton had done the cementing, Schlumberger, who are the gold standard. They are the most expensive in the oil industry for good reason, because they are regarded as by far and away the best, but you pay for the privilege. Before you start to run the downhole tools, you basically hook up your spectrum analyzer on the surface to test whether there's any vibration in the casing at all. Because if there's any vibration, there's a problem. i.e. it's only going to get worse. Okay, the technical term is that the well is kicking. The well's kicking. Now it might be microscopic, but it doesn't matter how microscopic the vibration, it's only going to get worse. Now the Schlumberger guys hooked up the analyzer, saw that it was kicking, went to the BP company man and said, "We have a problem, this well is kicking, it needs to be shut in now." Nobody would ever challenge the Schlumberger engineer telling the rig manager, the BP company man, that the well had reached a point of no return and needed to be shut in. Like I said, nobody on this rig was a trainee. The Schlumberger engineer would not have called this gratuitously. First of all, his reputation is on the line. Secondly, if he's ultimately proven to be wrong, then Schlumberger would be liable for all the costs associated with reopening the well. But the company man turned around to the Schlumberger guy and said, "Not on my watch, we're not shutting this well in." Now, this was actually the second well that had been drilled in this location. The second well, this is a floating rig. The first well had been drilled and it had reached TD, it had reached target depth, but then they lost the tool. They lost the drill bit, probably because they'd been a bit over-aggressive in the final stages of drilling. But they lost the tool and they lost a section of drill string. And they took the decision on the rig that it would be too expensive to try and salvage that well, so they shut it in. And then they started drilling this well, and now they were about to lose this well. Except the BP company man was saying, no, we're not on my watch.